Imagine discovering a forgotten vault filled with unheard music from Jimi Hendrix. Songs recorded at the height of his creative power, buried for decades, and suddenly brought into the light. That's exactly what happened when a collection of Hendrix's 1968 demo tapes resurfaced after more than 50 years. These weren't just alternate takes or low-quality outtakes. According to insiders who've had the rare chance to listen, these tapes reveal something almost unthinkable, a version of Hendrix we've never truly known. These newly uncovered demos are short, just a handful of tracks, but what they contain is explosive. Each song showcases Hendrix with stripped-down intensity. Gone are the long, wandering solos or psychedelic flourishes that defined his live performances. Instead, what you hear is precision, focus, a sharper, more deliberate Hendrix. It's as if he was reinventing his own sound, pushing against the boundaries that had once defined him. What makes these tapes even more fascinating is how personal they feel. Handwritten notes, tape boxes marked in Hendrix's own scrawl. Even small items like receipts and scraps of paper were found alongside them, painting a picture not of a rock god, but of a real, working artist, obsessive, experimental, and deeply human. And yet, despite the excitement around their discovery, there's one big catch. The person who owns the tapes can't just release them to the public. Control of Hendrix's music still sits with his estate, and without their approval, the world may never hear these recordings. It's the ultimate tease, a glimpse in a genius, locked behind legal red tape. Still, the very existence of these demos shifts the narrative. They hint that Hendrix wasn't finished evolving, not even close. Fans and critics alike have long debated where his sound might have gone next. Would he have moved further into funk? Jazz? Would he have embraced the stripped-down blues he started returning to in his final performances? These tapes don't just stir curiosity, they offer possible answers. And this is only the beginning. If these recordings were hidden for decades, what else could be out there? More tapes? Studio sessions? Song fragments that were never completed? For fans of Hendrix, it's like staring into a treasure map with only part of the puzzle revealed. This isn't just a story about rare music. It's about the idea that even after death, an artist's legacy is still being written. Every new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, and every piece brings us closer to understanding the full picture of who Jimi Hendrix really was. But this revelation is only the first crack in the surface, because just months before his untimely death, Hendrix was creating something entirely new. Something even his closest collaborators say the world wasn't ready for. By the time 1970 rolled around, Jimi Hendrix wasn't just changing, he was transforming. People close to him noticed it. He wasn't chasing hits or recreating past success. He was chasing something far bigger, a new sound, a new identity, maybe even a new version of himself. And the most telling signs of that evolution were happening not on stage, but in the studio. Those final months were packed with long, late-night sessions, sometimes going until the sun came up. Hendrix was experimenting like never before. He'd lay down multiple versions of the same song, trying new arrangements, new instruments, even new genres. Gone was the flashy showman only concerned with crowd-pleasing solos. What emerged was an artist obsessed with layers, textures, and subtlety. He wasn't just recording guitar tracks anymore. He was directing whole musical landscapes. He'd sit behind a mixing board, tweak the tone of a snare drum, or adjust vocal harmonies like a producer with a master plan. And the craziest part? He was doing it all at a time when he was under massive pressure from his label, from fans, and from himself. Some who worked with him say it was like watching someone trying to break out a cage he built himself. Hendrix had become the poster child of psychedelic rock, the king of Woodstock, the man with the flaming guitar. But deep down, he didn't want to be boxed in by that image anymore. He wanted to grow, and you could hear that shift happening in real time. Tracks like Angel and Drifting showed a softer, more soulful Hendrix, emotional, stripped back, and deeply personal. On others, he pushed boundaries with jazz-inspired chord progressions, layered rhythms, and studio effects that were years ahead of their time. There were no rules, no boundaries, just raw creation. His collaborators say he would often come in with new lyrics scribbled on napkins or scrawled across torn notebook pages. Sometimes they made no sense. Other times they cut right to the core of something universal. But every word, every note was intentional. He wasn't jamming anymore. He was building something. But underneath the creative explosion, there was tension. He was exhausted, overworked, trapped between business obligations and his own artistic goals. The pressure to deliver a new album, tour, and keep up with his growing legend weighed heavily on him. And still, he kept working, almost like he knew time was running out. In those final months, Hendrix wasn't fading out. He was ramping up. He was on the edge of a new era, an evolution that only he could see clearly. The tragedy? We never got to hear it all, but we do have clues. Bits and pieces from these sessions still exist. Unfinished demos, incomplete lyrics, rough takes. They hint at what could have been a second act, even more revolutionary than the first. And what he built to contain this new vision would become one of the most iconic studios in music history. By 1970, Jimi Hendrix had played the biggest stages in the world, sold millions of records, and redefined what a guitar could do. But despite all the fame and recognition, something was missing: control. He was tired of being told what kind of music to make, where to record it, and how fast it needed to be done. So he made a bold move. He decided to build his own studio. Not just a space to record, but a sanctuary. A creative fortress where no one could tell him no. That place became Electric Lady Studios. Tucked away on West 8th Street in New York City, Electric Lady wasn't just any recording space. Hendrix didn't want sterile walls and fluorescent lights. He wanted vibe. He wanted colors, atmosphere, energy. The design was psychedelic but comfortable, blending cosmic murals with custom acoustics. Every corner was tailored to Jimi's vision. The lighting, the layout, even the furniture was designed to inspire creation. But this studio wasn't just about looks. Technically, it was years ahead of its time. Top-tier engineers helped outfit it with cutting-edge equipment, soundproofing, and custom consoles that allowed Hendrix to manipulate sound in ways no other space could. Here, he wasn't a rock star with a time limit. He was a sonic architect with no boundaries. For Hendrix, Electric Lady was freedom. It was where he could experiment without label execs breathing down his neck. He could walk in at midnight, stay until dawn, and chase any idea that came to him without compromise. He started recording new material, music that felt like a complete departure from his earlier work. It was funkier, moodier, and more layered. You could hear jazz influences, hints of world music, and a darker, more introspective tone. Some of those tracks, like Night Bird Flying and Belly Button Window, reflected a new direction. Others were half-finished ideas, raw but full of promise. Musicians who played with him during this time say he was more focused than ever. Less wild, more thoughtful. He would record a guitar riff, then strip it down. Try something new, always searching for the sound in his head. And finally, with his own studio, he was getting closer. But here's the tragic twist. Hendrix only got to use Electric Lady for a few weeks before his death. It's one of the most heartbreaking parts of his story. He built this place, poured his money, time, and energy into it, only to be taken before he could fully explore what it could do. Electric Lady was supposed to be his future, a launching pad for the next phase of his career. And just like that, it became a monument. To this day, Electric Lady Studios still stands. Legends like David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, and more have recorded there. But its foundation was Hendrix's dream, a dream that was only just beginning. And as his musical ambitions grew, so did the turbulence around him. Fame, fatigue, and manipulation were closing in. And soon, he would face something he couldn't control: On stage, Jimi Hendrix was untouchable. He made it look effortless, setting guitars on fire, bending notes into emotions, commanding arenas like a man born for the spotlight. But offstage, the picture was very different. Beneath the swagger and the sound was someone quietly crumbling under pressure, pulled in every direction by the very success he'd fought so hard to achieve. The fame that launched him into legend also trapped him. Managers, promoters, record labels, all of them wanted a piece. Everyone around him had an agenda, and most of it wasn't about Hendrix the person, only Hendrix the product. His manager, in particular, was notorious for overworking him and allegedly signing him into contracts that bled him dry. Tours were stacked one after another, often with little time to rest or recover. For every electrifying performance, there were nights spent exhausted, frustrated, and running on fumes. Hendrix also struggled with his identity, both personally and musically. While millions viewed him as the voice of a generation, Jimi never felt like he fully fit anywhere. He was a black man who had conquered the mostly white world of psychedelic rock, but he was constantly reminded that he was an outsider in both the rock and R&B communities. He once said he didn't want to be the next anyone. He wanted to be the first Jimi Hendrix. And yet, he felt boxed in by the very image that had made him famous. There was also growing tension in his inner circle. Bandmates were rotating. Relationships were becoming strained. Hendrix had dreams of building a new group, something different from the Experience or the Band of Gypsies. But with every change, he lost a little more control. Rumors of manipulation, spying, and even sabotage within his team swirled around him. People he trusted were whispering behind closed doors, and Hendrix began to suspect he was being used. And then there were the substances. Jimi never liked being called an addict. He insisted that he used drugs to slow his mind down, not escape it. But by 1970, the lines were blurring. Sleep was rare. Food was inconsistent. His body was wearing down from the inside out. Friends noticed he was thinner, more erratic, more withdrawn. He'd vanish from social events, cancel sessions, or show up distracted. And when he did talk, it was often about starting over, somewhere quiet, away from the madness. But leaving that life behind wasn't so simple. Contracts bound him to future tours. Promoters demanded new albums. And fans, millions of them, were waiting for the next performance, the next song, the next miracle. The world only saw the icon. They didn't see the man trapped inside it, begging for room to breathe. Hendrix was still creating, still searching, but it was clear something was slipping. Not just his energy, but his sense of control. He was caught in a machine that didn't know how to stop. And then, just as he was preparing for a bold new chapter, everything changed. September 1970. Jimi Hendrix had just arrived in London, a city that once made him a star. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't there to celebrate. He was there to reset, to clear his mind, to figure out what came next. But in the background, pressure was building. The music industry wanted results. Fans wanted a tour. And Hendrix? He just wanted a break. He checked into a modest apartment in Notting Hill, staying with a woman he'd been seeing on and off, Monica Damman. Friends say he seemed reflective, even distant. He'd spend hours playing his guitar softly, staring out windows, writing ideas in silence. But others noticed something darker creeping in. He looked tired, mentally worn out. He talked about betrayal, about feeling trapped, about how everyone wanted something from him. In the days leading up to his death, Hendrix was bouncing between public appearances, jam sessions, and personal confrontations. One night, he'd be jamming at Ronnie Scott's club with old friends. The next, he'd be arguing about money, about contracts, about the future. He'd want to start a new band, finish a new album, maybe even leave the business behind for a while. But time was running out, and not even he knew how little was left. On September 17th, Hendrix attended a party that left him unsettled. According to people who were there, the energy was strange. Too many strangers, Too many questions. Some say he wanted to leave, but felt pressure to stay. When he finally returned to the flat with Monica, he seemed restless. He wrote a poem, took some sleeping pills, tried to relax. The next morning, everything changed. By the time paramedics arrived, Hendrix was unresponsive. He was pronounced dead hours later, just 27 years old. The official story said it was an accidental mix of wine and sleeping pills. But to this day, there are unanswered questions, conflicting timelines, inconsistent witness statements. Even the amount of medication in his system raised eyebrows. Some believe it was a tragic accident. Others believe it was something far more sinister. Why were key people never properly questioned? Why was Monica's story inconsistent in later interviews? Why did some of Hendrix's closest friends claim he was on the verge of cutting ties with people in his circle? People who had a lot to lose. The mystery around his final hours has fueled conspiracy theories for decades. Some think he was silenced. Others believe it was just the perfect storm of exhaustion, manipulation, and an artist at his breaking point. But here's what's certain: Hendrix wasn't done. He had plans, demos, lyrics, a studio, a new sound in his head no one had fully heard yet. And all of it vanished in an instant. Or it did it, because long after his death, something unexpected began to surface. Music that no one had ever heard. Hidden tapes, private sessions, ideas that hint at the future Hendrix never got to create. After Jimi Hendrix's death, the world went quiet, but not for long. Within weeks, rumors began to swirl. There were unfinished tapes, unheard tracks, forgotten lyrics. Whispers of a hidden musical treasure buried in the archives. And it was true. In the months before his passing, Hendrix had been obsessively recording at Electric Lady Studios, working through dozens of tracks, fragments, and experimental sounds. Not everything was polished. In fact, most of it wasn't. But what he left behind wasn't just scrap. It was a map, a blueprint to where he was going next. When producers and collaborators began to sift through the material, what they found was staggering. Hendrix hadn't just been experimenting with sound. He was redefining it. His posthumous material revealed a side of him that most fans had never heard before. Songs like Drifting and Hey Baby, New Rising Sun weren't just pretty. There was a purpose behind them. The guitar work was cleaner, the lyrics more spiritual, and the arrangements more atmospheric. Gone was the frantic energy of Purple Haze and Foxy Lady. These tracks had a different heartbeat, slower, deeper, more reflective. Hendrix wasn't trying to impress anymore. He was trying to say something. One recording, titled Valleys of Neptune, wasn't released until decades later, but even in its rough form, it stunned listeners. It felt like a transmission from another world. Bluesy, mystical, and completely out of step with the trends of the time, in the best way possible. It was clear Hendrix wasn't trying to hold on to the 60s. He was already reaching into the future. He'd even started experimenting with jazz structures, world rhythms, and multi-instrumental layering. There were tapes of him on piano, on bass, even directing string sections. Collaborators described him as hyper-focused and deeply intentional. One second, he was shredding a solo. The next, he was humming harmony lines for backup singers. He wasn't just a guitarist anymore. He was becoming a composer. And here's what's haunting. Many of these tapes were never finished. Some were stolen. Others were edited, remixed, or released without his final input. What we have today is only a shadow of what he intended. But even those fragments are powerful. They tell us Hendrix wasn't fading out before his death. He was accelerating. He had ideas, direction, and vision. The music was leading somewhere. Some fans believe that had he lived, he would have left rock entirely. Maybe formed a supergroup. Maybe created something like fusion before it ever had a name. There's even speculation that he wanted to score films or create an entirely new genre. And while we'll never know the full extent of what he planned, these lost recordings give us a glimpse. Not just into Hendrix the performer, but Hendrix the architect, quietly building a future that was stolen from him far too soon. But while his career ended abruptly, his legacy was only beginning. What came next would cement his place as more than a rock star. Jimi Hendrix died at just 27 years old. No farewell tour, no official final album, no big send-off. And yet, in the years that followed, his name didn't just live on, it exploded. Not as a nostalgic memory, but as something far greater. Hendrix didn't fade into rock history. He became its ghost, its symbol, its gold standard. But how? The answer lies in what he left behind, and what people did with it. After his death, there was an immediate rush to preserve and profit from his legacy. Record labels scrambled to release unfinished tracks. Some of these albums were thoughtful tributes. Others, hastily stitched together. Songs were remixed, rearranged, even retitled. And despite the chaos, the public couldn't get enough. Hendrix's posthumous releases charted high, proving his music had more power than ever, especially now that it was laced with mystery. But something deeper was happening, too. Hendrix wasn't just becoming popular again. He was being mythologized. Artists across generations, from Prince to Stevie Ray Vaughan to modern producers, began citing him not just as an influence, but as a revelation. He wasn't just good, he had changed what was possible. The guitar wasn't the same after Hendrix. Music wasn't the same. Tributes poured in. Books were written. Murals were painted. Scholars analyzed his lyrics. Psychologists studied his performance style. Even critics who once dismissed him started rethinking their opinions. He became the subject of documentaries, college courses, and fan pilgrimages to his grave. And through all of this, his image was carefully curated, sometimes by those with good intentions, and sometimes by those chasing a payday. His family eventually stepped in to wrestle back control of his estate, leading to years of legal battles. But the mission was clear: protect what Hendrix stood for, and finally share his music the way he might have wanted it heard. It worked. With access to the original recordings, remastered albums, and unreleased tracks began to emerge, giving fans a clearer, truer version of Hendrix. These weren't just cash grabs. They were revelations. Critics began to say things like, "This is the album Hendrix would have made next." And fans? They were still listening, young and old, new and loyal. Generations who weren't even born when he died were now calling him their favorite guitarist. But perhaps the real reason Hendrix became a legend after death is this: he never sold out. He never stayed long enough to become commercialized, diluted, or creatively burnt out. His story ended early, but it ended before it could be compromised. He died chasing the next sound, the next idea, and that makes him eternal. Because Jimi Hendrix didn't just leave behind music. He left behind a question: what would have come next? And maybe that's the real reason people still listen, still wonder, and still feel like they've only scratched the surface of who he truly was. Jimi Hendrix lived only 27 years, but in that short time, he bent the world of music into a shape no one had ever seen before, and no one has truly replicated since. He came from humble beginnings, climbed his way through rejection, found his sound in a foreign country, and then shook the entire world awake with it. But perhaps what's most haunting is how much of his story still feels unfinished. He wasn't just a guitarist. He wasn't just a performer. He was an inventor, constantly reshaping sound, experimenting with texture, and challenging what music could be. And just when he was about to break through to something entirely new, it all ended. Suddenly, mysteriously, tragically. But that's the strange power of Jimi Hendrix. Even in death, he never stopped evolving. His legacy wasn't frozen in time. It kept growing. Through lost recordings, reimagined albums, and the artists who continue to borrow from his magic, Hendrix remains as alive in music today as he was in 1970. Maybe even more. He didn't chase fame. He didn't follow trends. He just followed sound. Purely, obsessively, fearlessly. And that's what made him unforgettable. So next time you hear a guitar wail like it's crying out from another universe, you'll know That's not just an instrument. That's a ghost. That's Hendrix, still whispering through the strings. Thanks for watching. If you felt something during this story, if you learned something new about a legend lost too soon, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more untold stories, and share your thoughts in the comments today.